Greetings everyone and welcome to Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Shifarao Lako. Do stay with us. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has met with the United States Senator Jim Inhofe, who opposed the recent visa restrictions imposed on Ethiopia by the Biden administration. The premier tweeted, quote, "I welcome Senator Jim Inhofe, a friend to Ethiopians, to his second home, Ethiopia." The senator last week publicly opposed the visa restrictions imposed on Ethiopia by the Biden administration. Inhofe, a senator from Oklahoma, is in complete opposition against the U.S. decision to impose visa restrictions on Ethiopia. Quote, "I oppose the heavy-handed visa restrictions from the Biden administration. Ethiopia needs our support as they work to end the sectarian violence. Actions like this don't help us get closer to a peaceful resolution," the senator tweeted. The Joint Security Intelligence Task Force of Ethiopia disclosed that the court has ordered to freeze assets of members of TPLF and Shene groups who run businesses and properties to support ill acts of terrorism. The measure is taken against members and leaders of TPLF, including Lieutenant General Taddesa Warada, over terrorism acts. It has also deactivated assets of 141 suspected members of the groups. Now, the restrictions and impositions the USA has taken against its key ally Ethiopia is draconian, with repercussions kicking back. An activist and coordinator of the global Ethiopian advocacy nexus, Namin Zellaka, made this remark in an exclusive interview with ETV English. What makes the measure even more unfair, he says, is that it is based on unsubstantiated accusations and false media propaganda. The story is presented as follows. Growing disagreements between Ethiopia and the USA spilled over into an open confrontation when Ethiopian officials lashed out at Washington, D.C. over new measures, including aid cuts and visa restrictions. ETV English approached Naaman Zelleka, one of Ethiopia's opposition leaders in exile and part of the Ginbot 7 movement, which had armed resistance to the Addis Ababa government. Recalling that Ethiopia is an important ally to the USA, he says the measures by the USA are not justifiable.
The U.S. administration decision to take such a punitive measure, we can say, is draconian. Typically, such measures, punitive measures, are reserved for enemies of the U.S. Ethiopia has been a long-time ally in the fight against terrorism, and it has been an anchor for peace and stability in a rather volatile sub-region. And Ethiopia has also provided peacekeeping forces in the region and beyond.
He also recalls that the USA deliberately lent deaf ear to crimes during the recent TPLF regime.
This double standard and such arrogance is not helpful to maintain the long-standing relationship between the U.S. and Ethiopia. Now, with regard to the double standards, take the case of human rights. We can look back and examine many instances where both the U.S. and the EU did not take such punitive measures during atrocities, at the times when atrocities were committed by the TPLF regime, which they supported and propped for over 2 decades. We all remember the war crimes in Somalia region committed by the TPLF regime. There was a genocide in Gambela in 2003.
Mm.
The massacre of hundreds of protesters after they stole the election in 2005. These are just few of the instances. We can cite many plethora of atrocities committed in various regions of Ethiopia. Both the US and EU looked the other way. At best, they limited to quote unquote expressing their deep concern.
However, the USA has now resorted to the sanctions and restrictions solely based on alleged accusations and media propaganda, which justifies the unfairness of the measures.
What the Biden administration tried to justify these punitive measures on an ally, on a partner, is on the grounds of alleged atrocities committed in Tigray region.
Mm.
Mind you, uh, the Ethiopian government not only has pledged its commitment to undertake the investigation into these violations, but also recently the Attorney General Office has made its findings public, vowing to hold those violators to account. But you know, all these facts notwithstanding, the you know the administration has pushed for such an aggressive posture and policy that is unjustified and draconian.
He has called on the diaspora community, who were instrumental in the election of President Biden, to exert extra efforts to get the USA to change its unfair stance on Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopians and Ethio-Americans living in the United States of America have reaffirmed commitment to defending their homeland from external pressures. A webinar that involved participation of more than 500 members of the Ethiopian diaspora community in the U.S. has been held to explore ways to defend interests of Ethiopia from external forces. Ethiopian ambassador to the U.S. Fitsum stressed the need for coordinated efforts of the people at home and abroad to stop meddling of foreign countries and other external forces into Ethiopia's internal matters. Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy, Sleshi Bekkele, addressing the webinar, said external pressures that are being spearheaded from various directions against Ethiopia are aimed to disrupt the construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, calling for enhanced collective efforts to avert the challenge. Now, Ethiopians and Ethiopian nationals living in Rome, Italy, have also denounced interference from external forces into Ethiopia's internal matters. Ethiopians who attended the demonstration highly criticized the belligerents from Sudan and Egypt and affirmed unwavering support for the government and people of Ethiopia. They demand the U.S. and its allies stop unsolicited intervention into Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the Horn region at large. Demonstrators further reaffirmed support to the second feeling of the GERD and peaceful and successful process of the upcoming general elections. TPLF and its allies are spreading disinformation and fake news to mislead the world and bring pressure on Ethiopia and its people, the demonstrators said. They further purchased a 10,000 euros bond for the construction of the GERD. Ambassador Shibru Mamo held talks with Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez Parilla on various bilateral and other issues of mutual interest. He told the Cuban Foreign Minister that the 34th Assembly of the African Union Heads of State and Government has approved candidature of Arkaba Ekubai as the sole African nominee for the position of Director General of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization UNIDO. The ambassador assured The minister that Ethiopia is following amicable approach to resolving dispute with Sudan and Egypt through peaceful mechanisms. Ethiopia sticks to peaceful solution to the border dispute with Sudan, delivering humanitarian aid to people in need in Tigray, and has finalized preparations for the upcoming general election, elaborated Ambassador Shibru. The Cuban foreign minister reiterated that Cuba has full confidence that Ethiopia can address its domestic circumstances without intervention of any external forces. Now, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets of Addis Ababa to protest against foreign intrusion into the local affairs of Ethiopia on Sunday. Different foreign media outlets have reported on the rally, quoting protesters' messages in different ways. Demus Mokriel has reviewed their views as follows.
Converging on the Addis Ababa Stadium, these Ethiopians denounce what they call Western interference.
It is to be recalled that hundreds and thousands of people took the streets of Addis Ababa to protest against foreign intrusion into local affairs. Following that, different foreign media outlets reported the rally, quoting messages of protest resonated during the rally in different ways. France 24 reported saying thousands of Ethiopians gathered in the nation's capital to protest external pressure on the government over the law enforcement operation in Tigray. The media went further and said protesters at the rally in Addis Ababa carried banners that criticized the United States and others in the international community who are voicing concern over atrocities in Tigray.
Ethiopian pro-government demonstrators held a massive rally on Sunday, denouncing the United States for imposing restrictions on aid.
Reuters, for its part, said Ethiopian pro-government demonstrators denounced the United States on Sunday for imposing restrictions on aid over the Tigray conflict. Reuters quoted messages of protesters who said Ethiopia doesn't need a caretaker, U.S. show us neutrality, among other things. African News, on the other side, stated, citing more than 10,000 people in Ethiopia were taking part in anti-U.S. rally in capital Addis Ababa, denouncing President Biden's policy on the conflict in the country's northern region of Tigray. African News stated America's call for a ceasefire and withdrawal from Tigray is regarded as meddling by protesters. African News went further and quotes a protester named Abara Tesfaye, who said he came out to the rally to oppose the idea of foreign countries trying to interfere in Ethiopia's domestic affairs to babysit his country.
የፓርኩ ከፍተኛ ቦታ ዶዶ ተራራ የሚባል ቦታ አለ። እሱ ነው የፓርኩ ከፍታ ቦታ።
ከሌላው በጣም የተለየ ቦታ ነው። አካባቢውም በጣም ቀዝቀዝ ያለ ቦታ ነው። እንደገናም ደግሞ ያሉት ሪሶርሶች በበቂ ሁኔታ የሚታዩበት የዶዶ ጋራን በፊት ለፊቱ የሚታይ ዋናው የቱሪስት መስህብ ተብሎ የሚጠራው በፊት ለፊቱ የሚታይ ቦታ ነውና
Welcome back. You're still watching this News Hour. The Ethiopian Ministry of Health is set to create a tobacco-free environment in the country. This came while the Ethiopian Food and Drug Trafficking and Controlling Authority, in collaboration with the ministry, celebrated the World No Tobacco Day for the 29th time. Kasan Chane reports.
The Ethiopian Ministry of Health has celebrated World No Tobacco Day for the 29th time in collaboration with the Ethiopian Food and Drug Administration under the motto Commit to Quitting. Accordingly, Health Minister Dr. Lia Tadessa said World No Tobacco Day is meant to raise awareness of the dangers of tobacco and to create a tobacco-free world.
Every year that we commemorate this day of World No Tobacco is in addition to the national and international activities that are being done on tobacco control, like of course legislation and proclamation that has been out for the last 3 years to have a strong tobacco control and its implementation. This is to help us create more awareness of the community on the role that each individual and each institutions have in terms of tobacco control to create a tobacco-free society. And this is because tobacco has a lot of health, economic, social disadvantages and damage that it creates. So this is to collectively work towards that vision of having a tobacco-free society. And this year it makes it also more timely because in addition to the many health problems that tobacco creates in terms of non-communicable diseases like heart diseases, diabetes and other very difficult problems, within this pandemic of COVID-19, evidences have shown that people who smoke are more vulnerable to get severe COVID and even have high mortality from COVID than people who are not smokers.
In a similar development, Director General of the Ethiopian Food and Drug Administration, Heran Garba, also urged Ethiopians to work hard to prevent dead diseases due to tobacco use.
The prevalence of smoking is low in Ethiopia when it's compared to other countries. But this does not mean that there will be, if we don't control it appropriately or we don't prevent, we don't educate, we don't aware the young population, that does not mean that the curve will increase. Because more than 70% of our population is less than 30 years of age, and 50% of it is less than 18 years of age. So this is a vulnerable population group where the tobacco industry also targets. So we have to work on this population, but I cannot say that the tobacco prevalence is declining or increasing unless we have a substantial study in place. Smokers should be very committed enough to quit smoking, and also the young population, they should be committed enough to tackle or to withstand the peer pressure of getting into tobacco smoking. So some youngsters say that this is for fun, you can smoke one day, one time, and then you can leave it. No, you should never start smoking. Once you start smoking, then you will continue. You will be addicted because nicotine is very, very addictive, even more than heroin and other very hard drugs. So it's very addictive. So I ask, taking this opportunity, the young people not to use tobacco at any time.
Besides World Health Organization representative in Ethiopia, on his part stated that the annual campaign that has an opportunity to raise awareness on the harmful and deadly effects of tobacco use and second-hand smoke exposure.
It was in 1987 when the member states of the World Health Organization agreed to observe May 31st as the World No Tobacco Day, to draw attention to the tobacco epidemic and the preventable deaths and sickness it causes. In Ethiopia, more specifically, the Global Adult Tobacco Survey in 2016 reported that there were an estimated 3.2 million current smokers. With regards to motivation to quit smoking, the results are extremely encouraging, with 52% of the smokers indicating that they have either attempted to quit or were thinking of quitting. This is a huge opportunity that we need to capitalize on, to try and help these individuals who are committed to quit, to help them push them across the line so that they are able to give up tobacco smoking habits.
In connection with COVID-19, smokers are said to be at higher risk for serious illness and disease. It is estimated that 8 million people worldwide die each year as a result of tobacco use, as tobacco contains about 7,000 chemicals, 70% of which are said to be harmful to health. The problem is also a risk factor for cancer.
Now, the Human Rights Commission says 6 human rights minimum agendas are put in place in Ethiopia to help human rights reform agenda by supporting the ongoing electoral process in the nation. The Commission has held a consultative discussion with representatives of contesting political parties with the objective of promoting its human rights minimum requirements. Habtam Ashagri has more on that.
Ethiopian Human Rights Commission has held consultative discussion with representatives of all contesting political parties in the upcoming 6th general election. Speaking on the occasion, Ethiopian Human Rights Commissioner Daniel Bekele said the 6th human rights minimum agendas encourages all contesting political parties to maximize their effort to human rights commitment. According to the Commissioner, legislature and policy reform activities are critical to manage the human rights crisis in Ethiopia by undertaking democratic election.
The 6-point human rights agenda is supposed to be encouraging political parties for a human rights commitment, which means for political parties to pledge to conduct the electoral process in a human rights respecting manner, as well as for the political parties to make pledges on the human rights reform agenda necessary in Ethiopia. Your viewers might realize that much of the Ethiopian human rights crisis is a problem which emanates from political crisis of the country and which might require a major reform, both in terms of legislative reform as well as policy reform.
The point is also helps contesting political parties to take possible measures in a bid to respect human rights for all vulnerable groups across the country, Daniel added.
The 6-point human rights agenda is the minimum human rights agenda that we expect from political parties to make progress on. They relate to commitment for human rights values. They relate to pledges that political parties have to make. They relate to increasing and enhanced political participation of women. It relates to the protection of vulnerable groups, including women, children, IDPs, and persons with disabilities. You know, basically asking political parties what specific measures or actions they are ready to take to improve the human rights situation of both vulnerable communities as well as the Ethiopian population in general.
He also noted further efforts are necessary to manage complicated concerns related with the socio-economic crisis in Ethiopia.
Ethiopia remains in a deep human rights crisis, there's no question about that, but at the same time Ethiopia has also made significant gains over the last couple of years. I think it is fair to say that Ethiopia has made a step forward, but it remains facing some complicated challenges that emanate from socio-economic and political crisis of Ethiopia, and I like to believe that we have an opportunity to continue to make progress.
The 6-point human rights agenda that helps the nation to manage human rights violations, which are usually considered as causes of political crisis in Ethiopia during election.
Continental News, West African leaders